I think we all know that zone 2 training is important, but you might be a bit like me and just quite enjoy smashing races, doing a load of workouts, and basically just spending most of your time that you're on your bike cycling quite hard. Now, the problem that I've come up against at the moment is that if you go back and look at some of my race results on Swift Power, my heart rate just isn't getting as high as it was maybe 2-3 months ago. And I'm kind of think that this is because there's no differential between my easy days and then my hard days. A lot of it is just kind of either in the middle and not quite top end threshold, or just like really easy zone 2 training. Part of the reason I think people don't really commit to zone 2 is because they don't quite understand the science behind it. Now, I want this to be a bit of a place where people can come for good information and tips when it comes to cycling. So what I have done is at the back end of the summer, I did a VO2 max and threshold test at St. Mary's University in London with a colleague and friend of mine. And whilst we were doing this test, we just ended up inadvertently having this really great conversation about why zone 2 training works or how it works. So I'm going to share that with you now, because this isn't coming from me, even though I do have the odd qualification. It is coming from someone who's studying for their masters at St. Mary's University and really knows what he's talking about. So if you understand how zone 2 training works, I think you are more likely to commit to it. And that's something that I have now factored into my training, because I found that when I was an untrained athlete, as in when I was just kind of starting out, and my gains were very linear, as in I was getting a huge amount of adaptation from just doing any training, I found I could get away with basically doing anything on the bike. Now that I'm getting to more of a trained athlete, or I am more of a trained cyclist, I'm having to really structure my workout, which basically means breaking it up to nice, really easy zone 2 sessions, structured training sessions, and then racing. And I'm hoping that is going to change so that my heart rate during races can get back up to its high level and I'm not suffering from fatigue as much. So here you go, guys. I will say that the audio isn't the best on it because we didn't actually plan to have this conversation, but it was such a good conversation, I thought I'd share it with you guys. So this is why zone 2 training works, and hopefully it helps you understand how it works, and also just enables you to commit to doing more of it and putting it into your training plan. So check it out and let me know what you think.
There's a really good podcast with a guy called Inigo San Milan. He's on the Drive podcast with Peter Attia.
Yeah.
He's the coach for the UAE Tour de France team.
Yeah.
He's also a researcher in cancer metabolism. Big name with regards to lactate studies. And so he's, they ask him, like genetic action, for example, like, is that nature or nurture? And he goes, well, there's obviously a component of genetics, but ultimately it's a ton of time on training. He's been training since he was like 7 years old.
High lactate levels consistently for decades.
Well, a decade. It become like a bit of that, but also the other end of the stick is like consistent low end training. So there's the reason why lactate appears in the blood is the mitochondria run out of room to metabolize fat, lactate and other metabolites.
What do you mean time? Runs out of time? So that is in like the can't happen quick enough.
A bit of that, but also, so you know, like the energy demands have superseded the mitochondria's ability to provide that energy. So that kind of spills out into the blood, and then other muscles can use that lactate, and you're starting to use a heck load of glucose as a fuel source. So if you're the training adaptation of training easy on the perception scale and comparatively to going on a threshold or interval session, is that the mitochondria get a huge amount of work, and you're training those guys to mastize basically. So you get bigger mitochondria from them having to work a lot, and then off the back of that, they then split in half and then create more mitochondria.
Really?
So that mitochondria.
That's your zone 2 training basically.
Exactly. So you're basically your adaptation you're creating is a mitochondrial adaptation that you don't see much lactate in the blood. But what they're doing is they're actually pulling in a lot of fuel, including lactate, which is the lactate clearance piece. So we're measuring the net lactate values of the year. So how much you're producing versus how much you're clearing. And if you're not clearing very well, we'll see high levels. If you're producing a lot but clearing really well, we won't see much. So someone who's working actually on the his scale, he may be at like 14 here, but his lactates are at resting levels. He's just super good at clearing it. And what we see is
that like a zone 2 engine then?
Exactly. So what we see is on the surface of the mitochondria, you start to create these little portals or transporters, and they're a lactate transporter. So they're basically designed to pull monocarbonates into the
Out of the blood.
out of the cytosol of the cell. So that's within the cell itself.
Okay.
They'll pull lactate from the cytosol straight into the mitochondria
Before it gets into the blood.
before it gets into the blood. But also other cells, like this muscle cell is working really hard to produce. The cell next to it, the muscle cell directly opposite, can pull the lactate from that cell and use it as fuel. So actually it doesn't even skip the muscle itself. So you're kind of measuring like the factory within one cell, and then how the other cells around it are using the lactate as a fuel. And then after that it gets into the blood, and after that then the heart can use it, the liver can use it.
So what is lactate? So lactate can be a fuel, because part of it is what sits in the lactate that operates as a fuel then.
So it's basically you get reversed engineered back to pyruvate again. And pyruvate then gets pulled into the Krebs cycle, which is where fat will get metabolized, but it goes in as acetylcholine. So you get a triglyceride or fat cell that kind of gets pulled into chop into the Krebs cycle as acetylcholine and round into the Krebs cycle to get used as fuel.
And that doesn't make lactate twice as potent after going.
No,
because it creates more hydrogen cells. So what is like the hydrogen within the lactate that causes the?
So that's the buffering mechanism.
Yeah.
So yeah, as part of creating lactate, you then get hydrogen and ion at the same time. But that gets buffered with bicarbonate within the blood. So that's pretty easy to manage. But before even that hydrogen ion becomes a problem, lactate's pulled in, and because it's only a monocarbon, it doesn't produce a lot of energy, but it can, because you've got quite a lot of it going on, actually that does accumulate.
Yeah, so zone 2 is all mitochondria.
Yeah, exactly that.
Damn.